Hello, and welcome to Special Topics in Education, using text sets to engage student readers. This is the first of two videos. The first video, we're going to be looking at, specifically we're going to look at what text sets are and all of that. Before we begin, I wanted to make sure that those of you that have not already responded and did a forum post for The Way Schools Should Be, Navigating Learning with Text Sets, from I think it's wildlit.org blog. If you haven't done that, could you please stop the video now and do that first, because I kind of wanted to use that kind of as a basis, and then come back to the video. For the rest of you, let's continue on. All right, before I get into the meat and bones of this particular video, I wanted to just point out that a lot of what I have shared with you today comes from this great book called Teaching with Text Sets. If this is a strategy that you think you want to deploy in your classroom and you think that you're going to use quite a bit, I highly suggest this. It has a lot of great information. It's got a DVD so you can see some things in action. But yeah, this is a Teaching with Text Sets by Cappiello and Dawes. All right, so what I wanted to kind of frame first is just why do we use text sets? What can they do? Text sets are really incredibly useful in the age of the Common Core, because we know that the Ohio Learning Standards for ELA and literacy and history, social studies, sciences, and technical sciences refer to a wide range of reading, text complexity, multimodal texts. This course and the ideas in this course are designed to help you develop an instructional strategy that will help you to meet these learning standards, complex standards, but in a very meaningful way and in a way that all of your students can be successful in. All right. Wanted to bring up this, most of us are aware of this. This is Howard Gardner's, this is a infographic of Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. And really, sort of our understanding of text sets and our basis for text sets comes from the early work on learning, and that really was a basis for looking at such ideas as differentiation. Gardner's work on multiple intelligences really helped us to understand that students learn in different ways, and as we entered into the age of literacy, of technology, we really wanted to look at how new technologies can help us with those different ways of learning and different modalities. So literacy research continues to explore the ways that multiple modalities influence literacy and learning in our students. Through their use of or creation of multimodal text, students have the ability to use linguistic, visual, and audio modes that they generally aren't able to do when we just work with traditional alphabetic-based texts. So this allows us to help all of our students experience, conceptualize, analyze, and apply meaning to our texts. And so this is really important for us as we start to move. So when it ever possible, we know as teachers that it's really important that we use the information that we know about our student and their learning style and habits to apply strategies that allow them to capitalize on their modes of learning. And so we want to use that to engage students into very meaningful literacy activities. So while no lesson really requires us to do all of these multiple intelligences, it is important for us to understand how these multiple intelligences work, and to kind of grasp that text sets is one way to be able to work through those modalities. So one of the things I use is this idea that we're going to use multimodal texts, and also we're going to look at multi-genre text. So the question becomes, what are those? What does a text set include? A text set is not just going to include a whole bunch of traditional texts. As you can see, a text set's going to look at things like, yes, literature, and a whole bunch of types of literature, alphabetic text, including nonfiction, but we're also going to look at things like periodicals, newspapers, magazines, magazine for children, the information that's there, both the articles as well as the pictures. Multimodal digital text, so you can look at webcasts, podcasts, photographs, webcams, websites, all types of things that tend to enter our students more visually or oratorily. And then certainly we're going to look at primary sources, things like documents, photographs, artifacts, photographs of artifacts, historic homes, a whole range of things. So when we're talking about a text set, we're actually talking about a lot of different things and not just a whole bunch of traditional reading assignments. One of the things that I want to emphasize is just absolutely the value of having the visual in the text sets. About a quarter of the brain is occupied in processing visual information, far more than any other sense. Arnheim showed how from infancy we learn to recognize and classify all kinds of objects, peoples, actions, and phenomena, such as weather, color, or moods. Piaget showed that we learn from interactions from our physical environment, which comes to include not only its physical aspects, but also representations and images and signs. So a lot of information gets to us through our through our visual senses, and what that information helps us to make meaning of the world. So why text sets? Text sets are rooted in reading theory, and probably the most important reading theory in the 20th century was the transactional theory of reading, which was really heralded by Louise Rosenblatt in the 1970s. And the sort of foundation of the transactional reading theory is that when it comes to reading comprehension, printed word is important, but so is the knowledge and the experience that the reader brings to the process of making meaning. So the text is one part of it, but the student and the student's experiences is another. Rosenblatt believed that comprehension resulted from the transaction between the reader and the written word, and that's how we made meaning. So to apply transactional reading theory, teachers must show students how to use what they read and what they know to build understanding. So what we know is that teaching strategies that are used in transactional theory of reading are such things as the read aloud, the background knowledge, the ability to make connections, and the ability to ask questions. And so what then we start to think about is how can text sets help us to achieve some of these strategies that help us to support the students in their meaning making. All right, so teaching with text sets allows us to, first of all, capture the interests of the students. Because the text sets involve choice, and we know about choice, text sets can allow us to find different ways to interest different students. Certainly, too, because some of the texts that we can use are of different modes or can be more popular, a little bit more accessible, students can get interested in the topic overall. It can also help to prompt inquiry. Students begin to wonder why you're putting one text next to another. Does the order start to matter? That allows them to start to get different perspectives. And so students start to ask questions. So the different perspectives then become really, really important, especially when we know that our students, that their experience is limited, no fault of anybody, limited to their own experiences. And so what this allows us to do is help them to build an understanding of perspectives beyond their own. We know the importance that having prior knowledge has. So a lot of times our students will come to a text, especially a nonfiction text, without the background knowledge to understand that text. And so what the text set can allow the students to do is they can be reading, making meaning, while also building knowledge that helps them that they can bring to the next text. Because we build prior knowledge or background knowledge through reading as well. It allows us to give students a lot of mentor text. So depending on what we do with our end assessment, we can make sure that at least some of our text sets, or some of the texts in our set, are mentor texts for our students. As I mentioned, it allows differentiation of instruction. You can purposely design your text set so that you are meeting the needs of vast learning styles in your classroom. And then it can support vocabulary development. Students might hear the same word or similar synonym words for your targeted content, vocabulary content, and it just helps them. Okay? Another idea that's kind of really important is that it allows students to practice this concept of intertextuality, which is a very complex idea. The ability to shape meaning of a text by using what is known by another text is what we call intertextuality. So these are things that we can refer to, or we probably have used in some of our lit classes, have taught in some of our lit classes or reading classes, like an allusion or an homage, a pastiche, which is actually imitating an original artwork, a quotation, or a parody, which is imitation for purposes of humor. So right here we have an example of an allusion. Because I know the Dr. Seuss book, I am able to understand or make sense of what this cartoon is trying to say about the girl in the cartoon, what the guy is trying to say about the girl in the cartoon. So let's say that I have this song from 1995, so it's old, admittedly, but in the song, I'm going to just play the first couple minutes of the song, but I think what I want you to do is I want you to think about if you were using this as one of your texts. Let's say you were looking at a text like maybe, what's the name of that? I can't remember the name of the book that won the awards, the Caldecott Awards, but I think it's Long Way Down, which is a text about a boy whose brother is killed in gang violence. And let's say we wanted to kind of use an accessible text, so something like Gangster Paradise in this song. And so I have students that maybe don't have a lot of experience with gang violence or the gangster culture. So if they know the allusion in this particular song, maybe they'd be able to understand. So let's listen to it for a couple minutes. Oops, sorry.
As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I take a look at my life and realize there's nothing left. Cause I've been blasting and laughing so long that even my mama thinks that my mind is gone. But I ain't never crossed a man that didn't deserve it. Me be treated like a punk, you know that's unheard of.
Okay, so this is a direct allusion to, what is it? As I walk through the valley of death, I fear no evil. And what students can see by seeing that psalm turned around in the song, they can start to get a sense of the darkness. They can start to get a sense of the lack of hope. And this helps to kind of contextualize reading that maybe your student wouldn't have anything to bring to the text, background knowledge or experience. Another thing that we can think about is how a text set could help a content area teacher, for instance, hone in on a concept. So let me give you an example of a website created by a chemistry teacher. This is not anybody I know. This was just somebody that I found when I was looking, but I thought this was really interesting. So this is a chemistry class. I'm going to assume high school, not positive about that, but he has a page here for chemistry for the atom. And as you can see, there's a number of different things. There's a funny video in here. There are some traditional informational texts in here. There's a simulation that the students can use. There is a lecture in here that students can have. There's a whole bunch of memes. And so what's interesting, and then also a more creative text. This is interesting because it's using a text set to not help the students understand a central text better, but to help them to understand a central idea better. So, all right. Okay. So, what does it take to teach with text sets? Okay. We want to start with the content. It's very, very important that you begin to identify either a work that you want the students to better understand. So you're going to build a text set around that. So maybe if you are a reading teacher or a language arts teacher, it's a whole class read, a required whole class read that the students might have. If you're a social studies teacher or a a high school or a science teacher. Maybe it's a content. Maybe your central text is going to be the textbook, a section from the textbook. But the first thing you want to think about is what's the content. Then you build the text set around that content, and you help the students to organize the text so that they can respond to the text in the set, and you can assess, are they meeting those learning standards and goals that you had in the beginning. All right, so let's start with content. What curriculum standards do you want to teach? That's really, really important when we think about text sets. And that's where we're going to spend the first part of this course, is just thinking about what content do you want to focus in on. Part of this course is going to be for you to build a text set. So the first thing you have to think about is, what do I want to focus in on? Do I want to think about a certain work that I want to read with my class? Do I want to think about a certain concept or idea that I want to read with my class? I'm going to show you a model that was developed by NCTE, the National Councils of Teachers of English. But the idea of the text set works even if you're not going to design your text set around a fulcrum text. But what this is really, this is a unit planning design concept that has you kind of work from a fulcrum text. You can think of it fulcrum text or fulcrum idea, content idea. So for instance, it could be the atom, or it could be The Great Gatsby, right? That can happen as a fulcrum text. But what we need to find is something that has complexity, lots of layers of meaning. The students need to work through this. There's enough meat there for the students to be able to really spend a lot of time delving into this idea or concept. And then there's the context text, which are the ones that are more accessible, that create motivation for the student, that maybe allow the students to kind of begin to understand some aspect of the text. So they're overt, they're succinct, they tend to be a little bit more fun. The next kind of text that we would look at would be texture texts. So the text that we would read would be, these would be often somehow in conversation with our text. Maybe they challenge some ideas of the text, maybe they or maybe they add a nuance to it. These texts tend to be brief and they tend to be difficult. They often what I use for my texture text is exert something as well. You can look at exerting a work. So this idea of the context text, let me go back to that website. Whoops, sorry. Go back to that website. If you wanted kind of to think about what would this look like if I'm not doing literature, we could think about the concept of the atom as being kind of the fulcrum text. And we can see where something like dogs teaching chemistry, that would be a context, right? Text. But a texture text might be something down here like the traditional lecture that is posted there. So that's what we're thinking about. Just to think about the fact that a text set has some pretty different types of text that the students access for different purposes. All right, so what are you going to do? Well, your first assignment for this course is going to be to consider your fulcrum text for this unit. I guess it is your second assignment because I forgot about the fact that you had to read that first thing. But what I'd like you to do is to consider your fulcrum text for the unit. What complex understandings do you want your students to gain as a result of this unit? And what will you want to do how will you approach this so that you can carefully plan your unit? Some of the reflection questions I want you to think about is, based on the state and local curriculum standards, what content do students need to know? Based on my personal knowledge, what content do I think that some students need to know? And based on my knowledge of students, what content will engage them? Then your job will be to create a discussion post on Leo that identifies the fulcrum text, theme, or essential question that will be the focus for your student inquiry, and that you will build your student text set around. Then you'll write a thoughtful one-paragraph reflection that explains 3 key challenges that this text or idea might present to your students. It would be helpful if you were to use specific references rather than talking in vague generalities. So what you're going to do is you're going to hit over here in forum on Leo. In collaboration, you'll hit the forum and you'll be able to follow that. All right. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a good day.